everyone, today I'm joined by a guest and colleague, Dave. Dave works in the Kaplan marketing department as the Senior Customer Insights Manager. So if you have any questions on handling data, but from a marketing perspective, Dave is your go-to guy. So how are you today, Dave?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I know I've just given you a brief introduction, but just for the people at home, can you explain what a Senior Customer Insight Manager does?
Yes, so within Kaplan, we've got an insights function and I'm one of the managers within that, and I have a team of 3. Our main aim is to look at the commercial side of how students' buying behaviours, companies' buying behaviours with us, and then how they use our products and what they use to then achieve their outcomes with their technical qualifications and everything that sort of that touches.
Do you think that there's sort of a psychology element to what you do? Because you're kind of trying to think about how a customer thinks.
Yeah, there's always a piece of, there's always an area where you've got you see what the outcome is from all the queries you write, and then there's the bit of, okay, this is what the data says, but why? And then you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the student to sort of say, okay, this student's X years old, they've probably got this going on in their life, there's these tales which are coming out in the media, maybe that's having a big influence in how they're studying or how they're not studying type thing, and how can we get them back on track and those sorts of things. It's a little bit like the retail I do, like generally weather has a big impact on sales, etc.
Amazing. So obviously, because we're at Kaplan, I have to mention that you do the data analytics apprenticeship with us. So how are you finding that so far?
It's been insightful to sort of see how other analysts from other companies work, their skill sets, how they approach problems and those sorts of things, and just sort of confirming what you think you already know, and that your approaches that you've been taught and you've developed over time are on point with what the standard is out there.
Yeah, because I spoke to an apprentice that's done a similar course to what you've done, and she gave a really good anecdote that it's like telling a story. You kind of, the way that you analyse data and like present data and stuff like that, she said it's like one of the skills that she was having to kind of develop was a storytelling skills. Would you agree? Yeah,
100%. So at the end of the day, whenever you're sending out a report and stuff, it's just a series of numbers, and it's up to the analyst to sort of bring that to life. So an idea I would really love to be able to implement would be to almost the weekly reports that we send out on a Monday, or even the monthly ones, to almost have almost a soap opera story around our different qualifications, how they're performing, and then exam results, sort of the outcome, the crunch lines, those sort of things. Really make it almost like a Kaplan Coronation Street, if you want. And sort of to get that buy-in, because then people are interested in sort of what's happening with the data, not just, oh, I've hit my target, great.
Yeah, that's really similar to what I do at work. So obviously I have, my job is to talk about Kaplan and what Kaplan offers, and I know like when it comes to data and tech, some people initially think, oh, data, numbers, whatever, but then I try and make it relevant. So like, did you read the Chandler?
Yeah, Chandler Bing.
Yeah, so for those at home, if you've not read the Chandler blog, go on kaplan.co.uk, type in Chandler, and it's a good read.
It's a very good read.
But that was about a data apprenticeship, and that's how I understand it. Someone with no experience, it's like telling a story about something that other people, if you're not necessarily interested in it, you won't look into it. So it's finding that other angle to kind of tell.
100%. And the sort of the technical side and sort of sitting in a dark room coding is only sort of, I guess almost only 25-30% of actually being an analyst. A lot of it is the interpersonal skills, the storytelling side of things, and sort of bringing what you find to life.
So what we're going to do now is play a little game. So it's called Never Have I Ever. For those of you at home, you might be familiar with the game, but with this one we have a paddle. One side says I have, one side says I haven't. Rules are really simple. I'll read out a statement. If Dave has done it, the answer is I have. If he hasn't, the answer is I haven't. So there's your paddle.
Thank you.
So the first one, never have I ever not backed up work and lost it.
This might show me age now. This one really sticks in my mind, and it's the university thing, and it was 2005, and we had this like Excel exercise or spreadsheet exercise to do, and there was a certain amount of formula you had to write at home, and I'd done it, saved it to a floppy disk, and then as I was a bit nervous before this spreadsheet exam, I was playing, because I used to slide back and you could play with the film. So I was nervously playing with the film whilst I was...
Just, what's a floppy disk?
Very good question. So floppy disks was like a computer storage device which you could take in and out of a computer.
Right, okay.
And before USBs, you used to save 1.4 worth of megabytes to a floppy disk, and that was how big my spreadsheet was. So I saved it onto there, and you could sort of put it back and you could sort of play with the film. And I'd never had one corrupt before, so it was a bad practice, but it's sort of, I was nervous, I was playing with this. Anyway, so I then put this floppy disk in to load it onto the university computers, and it's just like unreadable, the file. Clearly too many fingerprints have gone on the film, and I had to spend the whole exam rebuilding these spreadsheets to try and pass. And I was just so annoyed, because I ended up with a pretty good mark, but it was one of those where I was just like, I don't think I would have got one wrong, which is annoying. You're building everything from memory. But it was one of those, and then like you sort of out afterwards in the pub talking about it, and I was like, but this happened. They're like, no, it didn't. You wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. I was like, but it did.
Oh my God. Yeah, because that sounds so stupid, because like, you've just saved your work, and it's like saving something to a CD and then taking the CD out and stamping on it.
Yeah, that's literally what I did.
That's essentially what you did.
That was the last time I used a floppy disk.
And you know what? I've never heard of it before. I've never heard of a floppy disk. That shows my age. And then the last one, never have I ever messed up a job interview.
I don't think it was any. It was certainly mustn't have been the one for Kaplan, but I think the one that actually got me into the analytics profession, let's just say I'd not been. There's a few that I've messed up. So before I actually got a job, so there was one, I think, for CDL, where I decided to spend the whole weekend, I was playing chat manager the whole weekend. So we get to the job interview and they go, so tell us about CDL, and I'm like, I don't know. But I do know I managed to get Nottingham Forest to win the Champions League. Didn't go down too well. So that's the main one where I have absolutely bombed at a job interview, and it's sort of, why have I not prepped or done any sort of inkling to try and get this job?
Oh my God, yeah, I thought you was going to say like, yeah, I actually went for the tutor job at Kaplan, but I ended up here, so I must have messed that interview up. So for our next bit, we're going to do industry myths.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read out a statement here, and you just let me know whether you think it's a myth, whether you agree, disagree. It might not be a myth, I don't know, it's just whatever you think.
Yeah,
you ready?
absolutely.
So the first one is, data analytics is only about numbers.
Well, that is definitely a myth. However, generally most analysts are most comfortable when they're within the numbers, but as we sort of spoke about earlier, a lot of it's about storytelling and bringing those numbers to life, getting stakeholders interested in the numbers themselves and sort of what they mean to their roles and their responsibilities and things like that. And the bigger picture of what a number means, for instance.
Yeah, that's true. But then at the same time, say like the storytelling element, but you're storytelling the data, which is numbers. Can you give like an example of data that isn't numbers?
So you've got like qualitative data, so it's sort of asking people's opinions around things, and within that you sort of see sort of doing some text analysis and things like that to see what's most frequent. You're counting again, but you sort of, or you could do visualizations in terms of frequency, and like word clouds sometimes are very nice ways to get visual engagement of qualitative data and things like that.
Okay, so there's an element of creativity.
Yes, yeah.
Amazing. So the next one is, data analytics is only used for marketing.
That's definitely a myth. So in terms of, even within our role, so we support the marketing team, but also we support the wider business in terms of, and we also we do some work with IT, some work with the product teams to sort of see how things are being used and the best processes to be adhered to in terms of getting useful data to the right people. So whether that's our tutors, whether that's our product designers and things like that, just to making sure that everything's being used and data driven in that respect.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I think because I speak to a lot of data apprentices at Kaplan, and a lot of them work in like banking or HR.
Yeah, so a few friends of mine work in HR analytics, and that's very much sort of, as you can imagine, like within Kaplan, there's all the HR systems and stuff we have, or wider company. So being able to look at analysis sort of, rather than looking at student churn rate, they'll be looking at employee churn rate and things like that. It's a lot of it. What a friend of mine once said, our jobs, whichever industry we work in, is always going to be very similar. Just the metrics are called something slightly different, which is generally what I have in my head. But so someone out there who's a specialist HR analyst would be like, no, you're wrong. But fair enough.
Amazing. So the next one is data makes predicting the future easier.
If it was easy, everyone would be rich. And sort of, I'm actually reading a book about the economy at the minute, and during the sort of banking crisis of sort of 2007, 2008, I think it sort of this has the whole analogy around the Queen asked the economists at the Bank of England sort of, why didn't anyone predict this? And they're like, and there's sort of there's this really long-winded sort of, we sort of saw this, we sort of saw all these things in silo, but we didn't join it all up, and then we couldn't quite get there. And it's almost like, but the actual answer is everything's very complicated. There's so many moving parts, because you basically, if you're looking at human behavior, and humans do random things.
Yeah.
It's not just if everything was if everyone was linear and did everything day after day exactly the same, then yes, predictive modelling would be easy. Because life happens, things change, people's circumstances change. It makes it very difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point of view, because I was going to say at first when you said like how did they not predict it, but they had all this stuff. But then like in today's world, it's essentially if you have all this stuff, all this data, you can predict it. But then one thing that you can never predict is humans.
Yes.
Okay, so next one, algorithms are always guaranteed to work.
So I'd probably disagree with that one. I mean, an algorithm is based on what it's learned so far and what it's learned on its training data and things like that. So it will work for a certain audience of people that do those behaviours. But then, like we said before, we can't predict always what humans are going to do. So, and therefore, that's when the algorithms start to fail, etc. Potentially in the future with AI, you might have algorithms which can learn themselves, so they can retrain as they're going forward. And we're starting to see that come into the industry now.
The last one, AI will destroy analytical jobs and wreck the economy. This comes up a lot in my line of work. What's your opinion?
I had a thought about this the other day, and I think it's very much, at the minute I see AI as an ally and a tool, and it needs a stronger governance than what it's currently got. And I don't believe that it will. I don't believe it will make myself unemployed or any analysts unemployed, because you need to use it as an ally and work with it, understand how it works, to then be able to then utilise it to then just be better. So it's almost like using an analogy of a new hire. A new hire comes in, they've got all these bells and whistles, they're very good at what they do, but they improve you as a worker, as an employee, so they're driving your standards up. So that's just, in my opinion at the minute, is AI is just going to make current analysts better analysts, and therefore still be sort of a step ahead of what a computer can do. Because from my experience of using it, it still needs quite a significant amount of human input to make it usable within the work environment.
Yeah, I somewhat agree. So I've always said it needs a human touch. Everything needs a human touch, because like similar to what you said before, it's just too linear if not. But I know we spoke about it a lot, but that's why learning about like upskilling in data and technology is so important now, because what you've just said, you need to learn how to manage it and control it and work with it rather than let it work against you.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that point of asking an AI interface to do something for you, or asking it for help in assistance. It's like two very different things, and just having that understanding of how things are connected almost behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think it is a controversial topic, but in my experience, all it's doing is saving me time.
Yeah.
Like, I get so much done in the working day with AI than without, and I'm not necessarily like tech savvy, so I can imagine like for a job similar to yours.
Yeah, I think it will just enable that sort of, you know, that data and tech skills gap that you see sometimes. So having spent a lot of time in hospitals, having a newborn baby, a lot of the sort of actual techs, a lot of the machines they use are very technical, and they've got what you would previously think would be an IT specialist job is a midwife's job.
Yeah.
And sort of like within being a marketeer, within that is sort of, oh, you're doing part of what IT is. It would just, I believe at the minute AI will just help narrow that gap, so people be more skillful within how they manipulate and use data and things like that.
Before you came on the show, we asked you to think of a number that is significant to you. Did you get a chance to think of one?
Yes, I did. I chose the number 6.
Number 6, and why is that?
Well, for the longest part of my life, rugby's been sort of a key part from the age of 10. Always sort of dreamed of being obsessed and heavily involved in rugby, and well, ideally I'd prefer that to have been my job, but it wasn't quite to be due to talent, etc. And as part of that dream, you dream of playing a certain position. So I dreamt of playing number 7, which is open side. However, as sort of your attributes develop and things like that, it was very evident that I would only ever be, I would be a number 6, which is sort of a workhorse, a grafter, who does a lot of the background work to make everyone else look good. And that's sort of how I've taken that sort of approach into sort of my professional life as well, I like to think. Other elements that by the number 6 are significant, I seem to, for a period of time, I seem to have an obsession with knee operations, and I've had 6 knee ops, which is just coincidental. I hope I don't intend to have any more.
So did you have to have your operations because of rugby, or?
Rugby was a significant contributing factor to needing an operation.
So with the number 6 being, like you've just said, you're kind of doing the work behind the scenes and not taking credit for it, would you say that that summarises you as a person, or just rugby?
I generally think I like to think it's me as a person, like a bit of grafting in a certain sense in terms of provisioning of resources so you can get insight out of them to then make decisions at a sort of a higher level, and people who are making decisions are well informed. So it's that background work, so that making sure people are well informed around those sorts of things.
And like, I'm just thinking about it now, it's actually really similar to what you do at work. So you, not the exact same, but obviously you do. Knee operations. Yeah, like less dangerous, but you handle the stuff behind the scenes. Like, my job is the front, like people see what I do, and then I might be like, oh, this did really well because of this, but you actually know why that did well and stuff.
Yeah,
like other person might get the credit
so
for
it's sort of, you'd be interested in why is this digital story done well, or X, Y, Z, and there'd be a lot of sort of, I guess, sausage making machine going on in the background to give you what you need. So
why did you not become a rugby player? I know you said because of talent, but if you still play it, you must be pretty good.
No, talent's definitely the key.
You're not that good.
I'm not that good. I try hard. I did at one point have on my Twitter bio, it might still be there because I never update these things, that it said full-time rugby player, part-time analyst.
Yeah, because it's like usually when you say like, oh, why did you not go into it? They literally say, oh, well, I had an operation on my knee, but you're like, no, I did have an operation on my knee, but I'm just not that good.
Yeah, it just wasn't that good.
But before we go, we ask all of our guests one question. What does career goals mean to you?
I got asked this a couple of years ago, actually, and it's sort of, I feel like it changes with time. So probably 5-6 years ago, it was very much I wanted to be the most technical analyst I could possibly be. And then it sort of evolved to being, I want to be able to lead a team, I want to develop my skills to be able to empower analysts to be better analysts, basically. And to sort of seeing their progression as much as my progression is sort of really nice to see. And I think it would be more along that. However, having started to sort of see that as my priority in terms of upskilling analysts within my team, etc., and seeing their growth, somehow the default, the thing that always seems to improve on the back of that is the technical skills. So I seem to still manage to get those. I think overall, my overall career goal would be to sort of head up a department of analysts and a high performance analyst.
Obviously, I know that you've been at Kaplan for 11 years, but for those watching at home, would you recommend working in marketing?
I would, 100%. It was sort of when we were in the office, just that work-life balance is just what, if anyone ever asks me, oh, why do you work for Kaplan? It is the work-life balance. We start at 8, half 8, we finish at 4:30, 5, and it's just that there's no pressure outside of that. It's your own time. And you're not expected to burn the midnight hours or anything like that. And it's that opportunity to be able to do other things. And as throughout early in my 20s, I very much prioritised amateur rugby over virtually everything else.
Yeah, so obviously like being in that industry and having that work-life balance, you can now still, because you're clearly very passionate about rugby, but like you can now still carry that on, whereas I think other people, if they didn't have a good work-life balance,
Yeah, and a number of my friends didn't have sort of those sort of outside passions, so they very much just threw everything into career, and they're doing really well, and that is a bit which I'm sort of behind on, if you like, but I still feel very happy with what I've accomplished to date.
Amazing. So for those of you at home, if you're interested in becoming a bit more tech savvy and upskilling in data and technology, remember to head over to www.kaplan.co.uk on the data and technology page. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.